Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we're going to be talking about the nodes in Battlegrounds Season 2, and there is some good and there is quite a lot of bad things. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that people understand that I personally love hard content, hard nodes, hard fights. I'm a bit glutton for punishment, and I always kind of like to welcome the challenge. At the same time, I do think that key for Battlegrounds to be the best game mode as it can is to make node combinations that are challenging, but not exclusatory, where majority of the champions will principally suck, for instance. And unfortunately, we're going to kind of have to deal with the two extremes of that. The first problem that I see with the nodes is that Victory Track basically has no node. And that is bad. And the reason why it is bad, it's because whenever there is no node, basically the bigger roster wins. And that is not what you want in Battlegrounds. Because we have True Lies. Node itself does absolutely nothing, just disable True Strike, True Accuracy, and True Sense. Not that many champions that do have those abilities to begin with. Especially in kind of like a vanilla environment. You don't need those abilities for anything. And the second node is Dizzy, which each time defender successfully evades an attack, inflict a disorient debuff, reducing the defensive ability accuracy by 50% for 12 seconds. And that's the second problem. So clearly here the idea is watered down week 1 version, and it's missing the Mixmaster, because Mixmaster gives any champion ability to wait. But of all of the 200 and some characters in the game that we have right now, only a handful of them can access and evade in any kind of like meaningful manner. And then even less of them are viable or playable. So it means basically it's going to be pretty much the same as playing with no node. Yeah, somebody might think that, you know, ranking up OG Spider-Man is going to be a good idea, but then soon they will realize that it's not. And it's not going to help them much. And everybody's going to go back and placing their Korgs and Sasquatches and Man-Things and other actually tough defenders. And then it's going to be exactly the same as playing with absolutely no node, like we had in one of the Battlegrounds matches. And that is going to be entire month of Victory Track. And I think it's very, very bad. Again, because in situations like that, typically, the bigger roster has way bigger advantage than if there are tricky nodes. And also, because all of the community incentives, challenges, and stuff like that are just made a lot more boring and vanilla and tasteless. And again, as somebody who does have a big account, this, you know, in theory benefits me because I have a big account and I'm going to be able to nuke things down very quickly. I'm going to be able to spec my mastery setup because if need be, I do have access to Liquid Courage Double Edge. We'll see if that is the way to go. And that is it. And that's going to be the month. So I do think Kabam is making a huge mistake here, and there should be that Mixmaster added back in or just some different type of nodes. I think running without nodes is not good at all. But now to the most important bit, I think. Or, well, at the very least, the bit that's concerning Gladiator Circuit. I am having very similar worries about week 3 nodes, because this, in theory as well, does very little. As in, like, don't knock the opponent down, and at that point, there's basically no node. So when the defender strikes attacker's block, the defender regenerates 5% of damage dealt. It should be a tiny bit of that regen that they get, and by the look of it right now, again, it basically means no nodes for week 3, which doesn't look good. But the biggest problem that I see is week 4. And week 4 is what I think we need to talk a bit more. Because week 4 will be basically dominated by the second node, crit me with your best shot. This defender takes 100% less damage from hits that are not critical. You see, that wording is misleading. because the way crit me with your best shot works everywhere else in the game, it means that only critical hits do damage. It means that damage over time effects deal no damage. It means that burst damage deals no damage. It means that passives deal no damage, direct damage, none of it. Only yellow numbers basically deal damage. And yes, we have a node that will help us crit if we are good at intercepting. Basically, whenever we intercept, we get guaranteed crits for 7 seconds, which is kind of neat. But here's going to be the problem. In ideal circumstances, even if you're perfect at intercepting, this node will basically just like nullify any effects, kind of. Except it is going to absolutely destroy the champions that are usable. So none of the kind of like standard champions that rely on direct damage, burst damage, passive damage can be used pretty much at all to get any meaningful results anyways. And crit me with your best shot, by definition, is the type of node that will either force you to do or let you do the same damage that you would normally, or significantly less damage that you would normally do. You can take champions like Hitmonkey, even for an example. Yeah, Hitmonkey has access to guaranteed crits, and that is where, majority of his damage comes from. But he also does bleed. Taking the bleed away means that he's going to be doing less damage. And that is one of the kind of like perfect poster child champions. Now, Mole Man, guaranteed crits, but ton of bleed, ton of burst damage, shock damage, all of that gets discontinued. So Mole Man's going to end up with about half of his original damage output as a champion that has access to guaranteed crits. And that is going to be the case for a vast majority of the champions, because not every hit that you land on your opponent is going to be a critical hit, even if you are very good at intercepting, or even if every hit that you land on your opponent is critical, you still will likely lose out on the damage you would do with bursts, damage over time effects, and whatnot. Which means the fights will just be significantly longer. And then we need to top it off with champions that are very limiting in the ways they receive damage, or very limiting in what opponents you can use against them effectively. For instance, great example here is going to be Nova. So Nova is relatively tough defender, but Nova takes 70% less damage from guaranteed critical hits. Which means effectively he might as well have, triple the health pool. Because you're going to have to get these hits in. And yes, you can use a champion with super high crit rate, but not guaranteed critical hits. But still, that means you're going to be missing out on damage there. And obviously, Nova is not the only one. We have Mr. Sinister, who will demand a heal block champion, or you're going to be screwed. You're going to have Ebony Maw, who's going to demand a high crit rate champion without guaranteed critical hits, or a science champion. Otherwise, all of those hits are going to straight up miss. And Man-Thing. Man-Thing reduces the crit damage. Basically, Man-Thing makes crit damage into a regular hit damage. So Man-Thing is going to be like an insane tank. And even dealing with champions like Sasquatch or Rintra or whatever is going to be tanky champions. You're probably just going to time out with virtually everybody that they use. There might be like 1 or 2 counters for those champions in these situations. And again, most of our offensive champions will be severely limited. So I foresee week 4 being an absolute poop fest. I think everybody is going to be raging, timing out, dying, and just not playing Battlegrounds. And having that as your week 4, I think is abysmal way to finish your season 2. See, again, when you go over the champions, crit me with your best shot. We have Abomination, for instance. Let's just go over a couple of kind of more popular champions. Abomination loses all his damage, basically. Champion that would normally be used. We have like Archangel, unusable. APOC, basically unusable because there's bursts and damage over time. Bishop, kind of if you get that intercept per special 2. Black Cat, basically unusable, loses all the bleed damage and burst damage, so on and so forth. There are going to be very, very few champions who actually are useful for attack. And this is going to be the other extreme, where with crit me with your best shot is going to make many rosters unable to compete completely. Where you're going to be able to, with moderate amount of defense, you're going to be able to basically force everybody into timeout. So, I don't know what's the best way to put this. I think... I truly hope I'm wrong, and this week's fine. I hope that whoever pieced together these nodes, Kabam John, did extensive testing with competitive players for many, many matches, many, many hours, and came to conclusion that this is workable, functional meta. I truly hope so. I hope that I am wrong and this works out. From my personal experience, crit me with your best shot has been a horrible node. Every single time it has appeared in quest, content, or any event, those nodes always were long and tedious and boring, and there are very few champions that actually do well on those nodes, or well enough, I should say. So I know Kabam's relationship with actual proper testing isn't the best. I do sincerely hope that this time around they did it. Even though I don't think they did, but I hope that they did. Because this genuinely looks like train wreck that's getting closer and is ready to happen. And I think it's going to be awful. I think it's going to be extremely awful. And again, I'm not saying it because it would be hard or anything like that. Because it's going to be hard for everybody. You know, I like hard nodes. I think, mixed master meta might be hard. I think this gimme shelter meta might be very hard. But I can see, how they can work. I can see how it could be interesting or, doable, so to speak. This one, I genuinely cannot. This last meta, I feel, is going to be just atrocious. Additionally, one last point. In week 4 meta, anybody and everybody who doesn't have access to Liquid Courage Double Edge Masteries is going to be screwed. Because I'm all but certain that that is going to be the only way you can actually finish some of your fights. And on top of it, running Liquid Courage Double Edge in the week 4 meta will not disadvantage you at all. If anything, it is going to be the best way to place the defense. Because with crit me with your best shot, I'm about 99.9% sure that you do not take the poison damage, you do not take the bleed damage, and you do not take the recoil damage. But you still get the willpower heal. So I'm quite certain that this is going to be 100% recoil meta as well. On top of being an awful meta. I'm very worried about this one. Let me know what you guys think. Catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next month